The doors of the Cathedral Church of St. Paul swung open on a May morning that promised rain, and the congregation turned as one to glimpse the Earl of Vantage, whose wedding had drawn half of London's aristocracy despite the short notice. A fortnight prior, no one would have believed that the notorious bachelor would take a bride, and certainly not one as unremarkable as Miss Nora Northcott. The Earl, Lord Kenneth Vantage, stood tall at the altar, his dark hair combed precisely, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. At 35, he had outlived 2 brothers and found himself with a title he'd never expected to inherit. More pressing, however, was the entailment that required an heir within the year of his succession, lest his fortune pass to a distant cousin, a man whose gambling debts and unsavory reputation made him utterly unfit to manage the Vantage estates. When Nora appeared at the entrance, a murmur swept through the pews. Her wedding gown was elegant but simple, her veil so thick it nearly obscured her face. She walked slowly, accompanied by her aging father, a scholar of modest means whose arthritis had rendered his steps laborious. For Nora, who had spent years in the quiet corners of libraries and scholarly gatherings, this spectacle was surely torture. "She brings no dowry to speak of," whispered Lady Hastings to her companion. "Plain as milk toast, and past her prime at 26. One wonders what desperation drove our handsome Earl to such a choice." The vicar began the ceremony, and the bride's responses were so soft that those beyond the first rows strained to hear. Kenneth's voice, by contrast, filled the cathedral with unwavering resolve. When he lifted Nora's veil to seal their vows with a kiss, he paused, perhaps struck by the depth of emotion in her hazel eyes. The kiss was brief, proper, merely a formality. Thus began the most scandalous marriage of the season. The wedding breakfast at Vantage House was a subdued affair. Rain had begun to fall as the couple departed the cathedral, which the more superstitious guests took as an ill omen. Kenneth found himself seated beside a wife he scarcely knew, watching her delicate fingers tremble around her teacup. "You've hardly touched your food, Lady Vantage," he observed, still unused to addressing her by her new title. Nora started at the sound of his voice, nearly spilling her tea. "Forgive me, my lord. I find my appetite has abandoned me this morning." "Understandable. These affairs can be tedious." He watched as she carefully set down her cup. "However, we must make an appearance of congeniality, at least until our guests depart." "Yes, of course." She straightened her posture, attempting a smile that failed to reach her eyes. Kenneth leaned closer, speaking for her ears alone. "Our arrangement need not be unbearable, Lady Vantage. I selected you because your reputation for intelligence and discretion precedes you. I require an heir, and you require security. Beyond that, we need not complicate matters with sentimentality." She met his gaze with unexpected directness. "I understand the terms perfectly, my lord. You need not worry that I harbor romantic notions." "Excellent." He nodded, satisfied. "Then we understand each other." Later, as rain lashed against the windows of her new bedchamber, Nora sat at her dressing table while her new lady's maid, Margaret, brushed out her chestnut hair. The room, though elegantly appointed with silk wallpaper and mahogany furnishings, felt foreign and cold. "Such beautiful hair, my lady," Margaret commented. "The Earl is fortunate in his bride, if I may say so." Nora met her own reflection with skepticism. "The Earl is fortunate in his lawyers, who drafted our marriage contract with precision. My appearance was hardly a consideration." Margaret's hand stilled. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but marriages of convenience often grow into something more. My own parents barely knew each other when they wed." "Perhaps," Nora conceded, "but your parents were not an earl with generations of nobility behind him and a scholar's daughter with ink-stained fingers." When Margaret departed, Nora retrieved a leather-bound journal from her trunk. She had been recording her observations of human nature since girlhood, finding solace in analyzing what she could not naturally navigate. Tonight, she wrote of her wedding day with the detachment of a scientist cataloging specimens. In the adjoining suite, Kenneth reviewed estate ledgers, a glass of brandy at his elbow. The portrait of his father seemed to glare down at him with perpetual disappointment. The late Earl had never forgiven Kenneth for choosing a military career over preparing to manage estates he was never meant to inherit. "You'd be pleased now, father," Kenneth muttered. "I've done exactly what's expected. Secured the bloodline. Maintained the fortune. God willing, there will be a son by spring." He drained his glass, refusing to acknowledge the hollow feeling in his chest. This marriage was a business arrangement, nothing more. That his bride seemed as disinterested in genuine connection as himself was fortuitous. No messy emotions to complicate matters. Still, he found himself wondering what thoughts occupied the mind of the woman sleeping just beyond the connecting door, a door that would remain closed this night, as he had promised her a fortnight's adjustment before claiming his marital rights. ****. 2 weeks into their marriage, Vantage House had settled into a rhythm. Kenneth rose early to ride and attend to estate matters. Nora took breakfast in the morning room, then retreated to the library until luncheon. Afternoons saw her learning the household management from the housekeeper, Mrs. Palmer, while evenings were spent in Kenneth's company only for dinner, after which he retired to his study and she to her books. It was a cordial existence, if not a companionable one. On this particular afternoon, Kenneth returned early from a meeting with his steward to find his wife in the library, surrounded by stacks of ledgers that hadn't been touched in years. "What precisely are you doing, Lady Vantage?" he asked from the doorway. Nora looked up, a smudge of dust on her cheek. "I'm organizing your family records, my lord. I discovered that your accounts from the Sussex properties haven't been properly reconciled since your grandfather's time." Kenneth stepped closer, surveying the ordered chaos. "And you felt qualified to undertake such a task because I managed my father's finances and correspondence for the past decade," she replied, straightening papers with methodical precision. His academic pursuits left little time for practicalities. "I see." Kenneth picked up a ledger, scanning her neat annotations. "And what have you discovered in your investigations?" Nora hesitated. "That your cousin, Mr. Percival Vantage, has been drawing funds from the Sussex estate for 3 years without documentation. Nearly £4,000. Kenneth's expression darkened. "That's impossible. Percival has no authority. The estate manager, Mr. Finch, appears to have approved the withdrawals." She handed him a letter bearing a familiar signature. "I believe they are in collusion." Silence fell as Kenneth processed this betrayal. Percival, the very cousin who would inherit should Kenneth fail to produce an heir, had been stealing from him while positioning himself as the concerned relative. "You discovered in 2 weeks what my solicitors missed for years," Kenneth said finally, reassessing the woman before him. "How did you know where to look?" "Inconsistencies have patterns, my lord." She glanced up, that same directness in her gaze. When one spends a lifetime observing from the periphery, one notices things others miss. For the first time, Kenneth truly looked at his wife. Her features, while not striking in the conventional sense, held a quiet intelligence that he found himself appreciating. Her eyes, he noted, shifted between hazel and green depending on the light. "It seems I underestimated you, Lady Vantage." The hint of a smile touched her lips. "Most people do, my lord. I've rarely found it disadvantageous." That evening at dinner, Kenneth found himself watching Nora with newfound curiosity. She ate precisely, spoke softly when addressed, but there was a keenness to her observations that he had previously dismissed as bookishness. "I'm traveling to Sussex tomorrow," he announced as the footman cleared the main course. "I intend to confront Finch directly about his dealings with Percival." Nora nodded. "A wise course. Though perhaps it would be prudent to bring evidence of other irregularities I've found." "Other irregularities?" Kenneth arched a brow. "Yes. There are discrepancies in the timber sales dating back 18 months. She dabbed her lips with her napkin. "I've compiled the figures, should you wish to review them before your departure." "I would indeed." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you might accompany me to Sussex. Your insights could prove valuable." Surprise flickered across her face. "If you think it appropriate, my lord." "I do." He found himself wanting to see more of the mind that had so efficiently uncovered what others had missed. Besides, it's time you saw more of your new holdings. Our holdings, she corrected gently. I am merely the steward for our future heir. The word our hung between them, a reminder of the intimacy they had yet to share. Kenneth found himself studying the curve of her neck, wondering if her skin was as soft as it appeared. Indeed, he said, his voice unexpectedly rough. Our future heir. That night, he found himself standing before the connecting door between their chambers, his hand raised to knock. After a moment's hesitation, he lowered it and returned to his bed alone. The fortnight was over, but something held him back, a strange reluctance to reduce their relationship to mere duty when he had just glimpsed something more intriguing. Asterisk. Sussex proved revelatory in ways Kenneth hadn't anticipated. The estate manager, confronted with evidence of his collusion, broke down and confessed that Percival had been blackmailing him over gambling debts. More surprising was watching Nora navigate the complex social dynamics of the estate with quiet competence, winning over even the most skeptical servants with her genuine interest in their work. They stayed at the hunting lodge, a smaller but still elegant residence on the property. After full days of meetings with tenants and reviewing accounts, they fell into the habit of dining together by the fire, discussing the day's findings. The northern fields have been neglected, Nora observed on their third evening, sketching a rough map of the property. The tenant, Mr. Simmons, claims he cannot afford the drainage improvements, yet his lease agreement stipulates that maintenance is his responsibility. Kenneth watched her hand move across the paper, the firelight catching the gold in her hair. What do you suggest? She considered this, tapping her pencil against her lower lip, a gesture he had come to recognize as her thinking pose. The estate could advance the funds for improvement as an investment. Once the fields are properly drained, the yield should increase substantially. Mr. Simmons could repay the advance from his increased profits over 5 years. A partnership rather than a punishment, Kenneth mused. Interesting approach. Prosperity benefits both landlord and tenant, she replied. My father always said that true nobility lies in elevating those in your care, not merely extracting what you can from them. Kenneth smiled. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is. Her expression softened with affection. Though his wisdom lies more in understanding ancient civilizations than in managing his household accounts. Hence your proficiency with ledgers. Necessity is an excellent teacher. She set down her pencil. When my mother died, someone had to ensure we didn't starve while father translated obscure Greek texts. It was the most personal information she had volunteered since their wedding. Kenneth realized how little he actually knew about the woman he had married. How old were you when she passed? 14. Nora's gaze drifted to the fire. Old enough to manage a household, but young enough to feel lost without her guidance. I lost my mother at 16, Kenneth offered, surprised by his own disclosure. Though as the third son, I was already away at school preparing for a military commission. Nora studied him. You never expected to bear the title. God, no. Thomas was the heir, groomed from birth. Edward was the spare. I was superfluous. He took a sip of brandy. When Thomas died in that hunting accident, Edward became the focal point. When fever took Edward and his wife in 45, the title fell to me like an unwanted inheritance. Hence your predicament regarding the entailment. Hence our marriage, he corrected gently. I could have chosen any desperate debutante to fulfill the requirement. I chose you. May I ask why? Her question was soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Kenneth considered this. Your father's reputation for integrity. Your own for intelligence and practicality. I needed a wife who understood that this was a transaction, not a love match. I see. Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment, perhaps. Have I offended you? Not at all. She gathered her papers. You've confirmed what I already knew. Good night, my lord. As she rose to leave, Kenneth caught her hand, the first time he had touched her since their wedding day. Her skin was warm, softer than he had imagined. "Nora," he said, using her given name for the first time. "I didn't mean, there's nothing to explain." She gently withdrew her hand. "Our arrangement is exactly as you described. I harbor no illusions." After she departed, Kenneth remained by the fire, turning their conversation over in his mind. He had intended to reassure her that he had chosen her for her qualities, not merely as a convenient womb. Instead, he had somehow wounded her. The following morning brought rain that confined them to the lodge. Kenneth found Nora in the small library, perched on a ladder as she examined the higher shelves. "I've had a letter from London," he announced. "It seems Percival has been spreading rumors about our marriage." Nora descended carefully. "What sort of rumors?" "That you trapped me into marriage by compromising means. That we wed to prevent scandal." Her cheeks flushed with indignation. "But that's absurd. We barely knew each other before the betrothal." "Precisely why it's effective. No one can fathom why else I would choose a scholarly spinster over the season's beauties." He immediately regretted his phrasing as hurt flashed across her face. "Forgive me, I didn't mean, no, you're quite right." Her voice was steady, though her hands betrayed her by fidgeting with her sleeves. "It's the logical conclusion. What do you propose we do?" Kenneth stepped closer. "We return to London and present a united front. Attend the remaining season events as a devoted couple." "You wish me to pretend affection?" The incredulity in her voice stung more than it should have. "Is the prospect so horrifying?" he asked, an unexpected edge in his tone. "No, it's simply—" She hesitated. "I'm not skilled at artifice, my lord. I fear I would not convince society that I've captured your heart." "Then don't pretend." He caught her gaze. "We've developed a genuine regard, have we not? A partnership based on mutual respect? Perhaps that's enough to build upon." Something shifted in her expression, caution giving way to curiosity. "Perhaps it is." The journey back to London the next day marked a turning point. As their carriage navigated the countryside, conversation flowed more freely between them. Kenneth shared stories of his military days, Nora spoke of the archaeological digs she had attended with her father. By the time they reached Vantage House, a tentative friendship had formed. That night, Kenneth again found himself at the connecting door. This time, he knocked. ****** Lady Harrington's midsummer ball was the first test of their new public partnership. The ballroom fell to hushed whispers when Kenneth and Nora entered, her hand resting on his arm. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, a gift he had commissioned upon their return from Sussex, that transformed her from plain to striking. "Courage," Kenneth murmured as they descended the stairs. "Half the battle is believing you belong." Nora squared her shoulders. "And the other half?" "Making sure everyone else believes it too." He guided her toward their hostess. "Fortunately, I excel at intimidation." A smile played at her lips. "Is that what won you military accolades, my lord?" "The ability to stare down your enemies. That, and knowing when to advance rather than retreat." He lowered his voice. "A strategy one employ now. Percival is by the punch bowl, watching us. Shall we disappoint him with our marital harmony?" Before she could reply, they were intercepted by Lady Harrington, a formidable widow whose social approval could make or break reputations. "Lord and Lady Vantage," she greeted them, her keen eyes assessing. "How lovely to see you both. We've heard so much about your hasty nuptials." "Not so hasty, Lady Harrington," Kenneth replied smoothly. "Some matches simply require less deliberation when they're clearly right." Lady Harrington's gaze shifted to Nora. "Indeed? And how are you finding your new position, Lady Vantage?" The transition from scholar's daughter to countess must be challenging. Nora met the older woman's scrutiny without flinching. "Every marriage requires adaptation, my lady. Fortunately, my husband values substance over ceremony, a quality I've come to greatly appreciate." Kenneth felt a surge of pride at her composed response. My wife is being modest. She's revolutionized our estate management in barely a month. The Vantage holdings haven't been so efficiently run in a generation. How practical. Lady Harrington's tone suggested this was not entirely a compliment. Intelligence is the most alluring quality, wouldn't you agree? Kenneth placed his hand over Nora's, noting how her pulse quickened at his touch. Beauty fades, but a meeting of minds, that sustains a marriage. The dance floor beckoned, and Kenneth led Nora into a waltz, their first dance since their wedding. Her movements were hesitant at first, then gradually more fluid as she followed his lead. You dance beautifully, he observed. Another hidden talent. Hardly. My father insisted on lessons, he believed physical grace complemented mental discipline. Her lips curved. Though I rarely had opportunity to practice. Then we must remedy that deficiency. His arm tightened slightly around her waist. You feel different tonight. It's merely the gown, she deflected. Fine fabric creates illusions. No. His gaze held hers. It's confidence. It transforms you. A blush colored her cheeks. An illusion of another sort, then. I'm merely playing the role required. Are you? He guided her through a turn, bringing her closer than propriety strictly allowed. Because your eyes betray you, Nora. How so? They reveal that you're not indifferent to me. His voice dropped lower. Just as I am no longer indifferent to you. The music ended before she could respond. As they parted, Kenneth noticed Percival approaching with determined strides. Cousin, Percival greeted him with false cheer, his gaze lingering inappropriately on Nora. And the lovely new countess. You've been keeping her hidden away since the wedding. One wonders why. Perhaps because I treasure my wife's company too much to share it unnecessarily, Kenneth replied coolly. Though I understand such sentiment might be foreign to you, given your history with matrimony. Percival's smile tightened. He was a handsome man of 30, with fashionable whiskers and the kind of charm that appealed to young debutantes and their mothers, until they discovered his financial improprieties. I heard you visited the Sussex estate, Percival continued. Checking your investments before the entailment deadline. Only 7 months remaining, by my calculation. Kenneth felt Nora stiffen beside him. Our personal matters are none of your concern. On the contrary, cousin. As your heir presumptive, I take great interest in your productivity. Percival's gaze slid to Nora's midsection. Or lack thereof. Before Kenneth could respond, Nora spoke, her voice soft but carrying. How fortunate we are, Mr. Vantage, that the entailment specifies an heir, not merely a child. She smiled placidly. A daughter would secure my position and jointure, while the estate would still pass to you, though without the liquid assets, of course. Those Lord Vantage may dispose of as he wishes. Percival's expression faltered. What do you mean? My husband's personal fortune, separate from the entailed properties, is quite substantial. Should we have a daughter, all those funds would remain under her control through trusts I would manage as her guardian. Her smile widened. Whereas if we have a son, you receive nothing. Either way, your recent withdrawals from the Sussex estate will need to be repaid. Colour drained from Percival's face. I don't know what you're implying. She implies nothing, Kenneth interjected. She states facts, which we have documented thoroughly. Now, if you'll excuse us, I promise my wife another dance. As they moved away, Kenneth squeezed Nora's hand. That was brilliantly handled. He needed to understand that I am not a passive participant in this marriage. Her eye sparkled with a fire he'd never seen before. Even if we fail to produce a son, he will not benefit from his treachery. When did you become so formidable? Kenneth asked, genuine admiration in his voice. I've always been formidable, my lord, she replied. You simply never noticed. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Kenneth found himself increasingly aware of Nora's proximity, the scent of lavender in her hair, the graceful turn of her wrist as she gestured, the quiet intelligence in her responses to even the most impertinent inquiries. When they finally returned home in the early hours, an unfamiliar tension hummed between them. In the privacy of their carriage, Kenneth had impulsively taken her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Now, standing in the grand foyer of Vantage House, neither seemed willing to part for their separate chambers. "You were magnificent tonight," Kenneth said finally. "Every inch a countess." Nora's smile held a hint of vulnerability. "It seems I'm learning to play my part convincingly." "Is that all it is?" "A part?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her eyes. "Because what I witnessed tonight didn't feel like performance." "What did it feel like, then?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Kenneth lowered his mouth to hers. Unlike the brief, ceremonial kiss of their wedding day, this was a true claiming, tender at first, then deepening as Nora responded with unexpected passion. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "It felt like truth," he murmured against her lips. "Like something neither of us anticipated." That night, the connecting door between their chambers remained open. *****. By autumn, Vantage House had transformed. Gone was the austere formality that had characterized it for generations. Nora had softened its edges with books and fresh flowers, rearranged furniture to create conversation areas, and installed a pianoforte in the drawing room, though she played only moderately well. More profound was the change in its master. Kenneth, once solitary and reserved, now sought his wife's company and counsel in all matters. They developed rituals, morning rides when weather permitted, afternoons in the library reviewing estate matters, evenings by the fire discussing everything from Greek philosophy to agricultural innovations. And nights of discovery and growing passion that belied their pragmatic beginning. The November morning when Nora failed to join him for breakfast, Kenneth felt the first stirrings of concern. When her lady's maid reported that the Countess was indisposed, his worry deepened. By noon, when the physician departed their bedchamber with a knowing smile, Kenneth's world tilted on its axis. "A child," he repeated, standing by Nora's bedside. "You're certain?" Dr. Edwards nodded. "All signs indicate Lady Vantage is approximately 6 weeks along. The morning sickness should pass by the new year, though I've recommended rest and light meals in the interim." After the doctor departed, Kenneth sat beside his wife, taking her pale hand in his. "Are you well?" "Truly?" "Merely nauseated," she assured him. "It will pass." "This changes everything," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Nora's expression clouded. "Does it?" "We've achieved our goal. The entailment is satisfied." "You think that's all this means to me?" He frowned, reading the uncertainty in her eyes. "Nora, this child is more than an heir. It's a testament to what's grown between us." "And what has grown between us, Kenneth?" she asked softly. "We've never named it." He had faced cannon fire with less trepidation than he felt in this moment. "I believe it's what most people call love. Though that seems an inadequate word for how thoroughly you've transformed my existence." Tears welled in her eyes. "You needn't say such things. I'm already carrying your child." "Damn it, Nora." He took her face between his hands. "I'm not saying it out of obligation. I'm saying it because it's true. Because somewhere between our wedding day and this moment, you became essential to me, not for the title or the entailment or any practical consideration, but for yourself. Your mind. Your heart. Your courage." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I feared I was alone in these feelings, that you had grown fond of me, perhaps, but nothing more." "Nothing more." He laughed softly. "My brilliant, oblivious wife. I've been half mad with love for you since Sussex. You never said, because I feared you still saw our marriage as a transaction." He pressed his forehead to hers. "That you were honoring your part of the bargain by sharing my bed, nothing more." "How could you think that?" Her hands clutched his lapels. "I've loved you since you knocked on our connecting door, not because you were claiming your marital rights, but because you sought my companionship first." The misunderstandings between them dissolved in a kiss that held both promise and redemption. When they parted, Kenneth placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Boy or girl, this child will be cherished," he vowed. "As will its mother, for as long as I draw breath." The April morning when their son was born dawned clear and bright. After hours of labor that left Kenneth pacing the corridor like a caged tiger, the midwife finally emerged with news that mother and child were well. Kenneth entered their bedchamber to find Nora propped against pillows, a small bundle cradled in her arms. The exhaustion on her face gave way to radiant joy when she saw him. "Come meet your heir," she said softly. Kenneth Edward Vantage, future Earl of Vantage. Kenneth sat beside her, marveling at the tiny perfect face. "He's magnificent." He pressed a kiss to her brow. "As is his mother." "We fulfilled our contract," Nora teased, though her eyes were serious. "The entailment is secure." "To hell with the entailment." Kenneth carefully gathered them both in his arms. "You've given me far more than an heir, Nora. You've given me a family. A purpose. A heart I didn't know I was missing." Outside, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral rang out to announce the birth of the heir. In drawing rooms across London, society matrons who had once whispered about the Earl's odd choice of bride now nodded sagely, as if they'd always seen the wisdom in his selection. In Sussex, estate workers raised a toast to their new young master and the Countess who had transformed their livelihoods with her innovative management. And in a bedchamber in Vantage House, a family that began as a business arrangement celebrated the most precious fortune of all, one that could never be entailed or inherited, only freely given and gratefully received. As twilight fell, Kenneth held his son to the window, showing him the first stars appearing in the sky. "Your mother once told me that she spent her life observing from the periphery," he told the infant. "But she was meant to be at the center of this family, of this estate, of my world." Behind him, Nora watched, her heart full. The shy bride had found her voice, the pragmatic scholar had discovered passion, and the woman who had once believed herself unremarkable now recognized her own worth, not through her husband's validation, but through the strength she had always possessed. And the Earl, who had needed only an heir, had received instead the profound gift of love, transforming not just his fortune, but his very soul.